work around the idea that.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's school board meeting of Independent School District 191, Burnsville, Egan, Savage. It's November 15th. The time is 6:30 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order. I'll ask Director Vandenboom to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. First on our agenda will be the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion? So moved by Director Schatz, second by Director Miller. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries. We will move right into the information part of our meeting. First up, we will be hearing from our William Byrne Elementary Principal, Lyle Boomstra. He will be presenting on our continuing series of what's happening in our district.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Chair Schmidt, Superintendent Amoroso, members of the board. I'm Lyle Wamsta, proud principal of William Byrne, and I just have a few things to share with you tonight. Let's start with the leadership team. Our building leadership team represents a wide range of staff. You have upper grade teachers and lower grade teachers. And then a new addition this year was our English as a second language teacher, Ashley Johnson, and an important member of the team just because she brings a unique perspective to of a group of kiddos that we're trying to support more and more. And then we have a new continuous improvement coach, Allie Skoglin, who's an exciting support team member. Demographically, our percentages, our population overall has really stayed pretty stable over the last several years. There's been a few changes. Our Hispanic population has changed a few percentage points from around 10% to about 11.4%. The Asian population tends to fluctuate slightly, hovers around, right now it's 6.4%, but hovers around 10%. Our white population has, in the last 5 years or so, has decreased by about 10%. And then our Black or African American population has changed slightly, about 2%, increased about 2%. Our special populations also have changed recently in the last 5 years or so. The English learner population has changed from around 15% to almost climbing towards 20%, 19% currently. Our special education population was around 10% and is now around 14%. And our free and reduced lunch population has changed from about 10% over the last 5 years. Our site improvement plan goals are based in reading and in math this year, and they're focused on the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, the MCAs, and the goals are both focused for both areas on students of color. The reason for this is that this is a group of students who we have historically underserved, and we wanted to set some the building goals on a group that we need to do better with, and then these building goals trickle down into what teams do on a daily basis. And so by focusing on a specific student group, that leads to changes in behavior on a daily basis, and that's the goal and direction that we came to with the building leadership team. Here is an overview of our reading Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment results over the last few years. The results have, in the category of exceeds and meets, has hovered around 50% in the area of reading. Some data trends in the area of math has been very similar. It's hovered around 55% over the last 3 years in the areas of exceeds and meets. Some data to celebrate. We've had, in the area of the progress towards English language proficiency, we've had almost 85% average progress towards the target versus the state average of around 67%. Our reading academic progress reading level improved. It was about 10% higher than the state average. Our science MCA scores are consistently about 10% higher than the state average. Our math MCA results for Black students is about 20% higher than the state average, and the data came from the MDE data center. So though we definitely have some data to celebrate, there's absolutely room for improvement. Those percentages in the area of reading and math and hovering around 50% is not good enough, especially when you do comparison data between the dominant culture group and our students of color. And so that's why we are focused on the MCAs. So now it leads to the question, if that's our data, then what do we do about it, or how do we address that? And so we like to, at Byrne, we like to focus on, kind of view it as a pyramid, and we do that both by having things in place that support kids academically and things that support kids socially, emotionally. The chart says their behavior, but I tend to think of it more as a social, emotional kind of support. And the pyramid is important, and that visual's there because we used to, in education, think about kids in kind of a one-size-fits-all, and we've learned that if we're going to be effective with students, that we need to make sure that we are doing some things for all kids, and that's your baseline. But as needs ebb and flow with kids, we have to react differently, both academically and socially. And so that's what that pyramid is designed to represent, is that all kids get certain things, and then as you go up that pyramid, some kids need a little bit more at different times in their lives. And then there's that top of the pyramid, and that represents that some kids really need really specialized supports, either emotionally or academically, if we're gonna be successful with them. And that's what that visual means. That visual in our district and across the country is typically called a multiple tiered system of supports, or MTSS. And it has really three big ideas. There's assessments, it's effective instruction, and then there's collaborative teams. And the most important part of that is the collaborative teams. You can have great assessments, you can have effective instruction, but the collaborative team is the kind of the glue that makes everything stick. It's the people on the ground interacting with assessments, the people on the ground interacting with their kids. And when things don't go well, or when things go well, those are the people that see that and need to react to that. So at Byrne, these collaborative teams, this has really changed over time. This year, there's much more of a team approach, is beyond the classroom. In the photo there, you'll see that's a fifth grade team, and there's 3 teachers on the fifth grade team, and then in that picture, you'll see there's a social worker, there's a family liaison, and a special education teacher. And that's just an example of what we do now, is that when we come together to talk about our kids and plan for them, it's much more than just a teacher in their room by themselves or a team of teachers. It's a whole support team. And this also fits really well with that pyramid that I just discussed. It shows that when we get together, and we might be planning math, but we're still thinking about their social emotional needs as well. This year, the building goal is around a specific group of students, and so same thing at the building level, at the grade level. Each grade level has a unique group of kiddos that we're calling them our focus students, and they handpick them based on some criteria to really use them to make sure that we are taking steps each and every day to meet our goal. And as a building leadership team, we arrived at that because we knew that if sometimes you can have goals and they're just too broad, too vague. And so our goal was to make it very real and get down to the student level. And by handpicking individual students, we can say, here's this goal that can be kind of abstract at times, but when I apply that to a specific child, then that means something. Like, how am I achieving this goal? And by tracking that student and the success with that student is really important. How the teachers are doing this is they're doing it through small groups, they're doing it on one-on-one or individualized instruction, and they're doing it by whole group. They meet weekly to collect data around their progress, and they're also doing small data, I like to call it. Very important that sometimes we think of big data like MCA scores or MAP scores, but it's really important that the teachers on a daily basis are gathering information about their kids and changing their instruction. And so I like to call that small data, and so that's the daily data gathering. Here is an example of some academic pieces that are kind of in a pyramid sort of way. If you kind of look on the left there, I just took some pictures around the building, and I'll just kind of discuss them briefly. On the left, you see those little handprints, and you can see the letter S, and then you see the sight words, the, and can, and see. And this is an example of kind of a soft strategy that the kindergarten teachers are trying. And it's really unique. I asked them, like, well, how often would you, or how long would you take to cover the letter S? And letter sounds, or letter names, are a big thing right now in kindergarten. And they would say, well, we might spend about 10 minutes on that, and then we'd kind of move on. And that's not the only time they would see that, but that's the core lesson for it. And so they realized that's probably not enough exposure. So the little letter S right there, that's right by the kindergarten doorway. And so what they taught their kids is that every time you pass it, you have to give it a high five and say its name. And then eventually it's going to lead to, hey, you have to say S. And this is the cutest thing, because I've seen like little kindergartners walking to the media center, and maybe there's a group that's kind of, kindergarten lines sometimes kind of stretch. And they were walking out the door the other day, and one of the little kiddos walked by, and he didn't do the S, like he didn't give it a high five, and his neighbor, his little kiddo, said, hey, you didn't do it. So he made his peer go back and smack the S, and it was funny. It was a great thing to see. But that's something we think about. And I said, now kids are transitioning out of that room 5-6 times a day. They just, they're hitting it, 5, 10, 15 times a day. They just increase their exposure by 500%. And so it's a great example of a team thinking differently, or laterally, I'd like to call it, where it doesn't take, the initial thought took extra effort, but actually, once it's going, there's no extra effort here, no extra cost really, and it makes a huge difference. We just gave our kids 500% more exposure to their letter names and sounds. And so it's fun to see. And they have fun with it. The teachers now mess with them a little bit, and they change the letters around a little bit, because sometimes the kids just get used to memorizing it. And so there's things in our reading program that varies in difference from child to child. And then a few kids are getting very specialized intervention support. So that's just a visual. I wanted you guys to see how we support our kids in that kind of pyramid style. Here is an example of that same kind of pyramid with some of those social emotional supports that we have at all our schools. And at the base, all our kids have the positive behavior and interventions and supports. At William Byrne, it's called REACH. So we have REACH t-shirts, we have REACH days. It's an acronym that we use to we like to say it's our way to teach our values to our kids and teach our school rules under this umbrella of REACH. And then we have culturally proficient schools. And that's still alive and well and an ongoing. Those of you that have been exposed to that and know about that, you know that it's an ongoing journey. It's not like something you accomplish and check off a list, but it's something that's always there. You always get deeper and deeper, and that's a critical part to who we are as a school. We had a day-to-day today, and that was something, that's how we kicked off our meeting, as we made connections to our CPSS rubric and where does day-to-days, where do they live? And so it's something that we like to pull out and use and remind ourselves all the time as we go forward. Further up this pyramid, you'll see that I took a picture of a zones of regulation. That's a curriculum piece that we do with some of our kids. Some students sometimes need skills, and how do you regulate? If you're really upset, instead of pushing or hitting, you can do what? And us kids need that. If you have all sorts of emotions, sometimes you don't know how to control them, you need to be taught how to control them. So that's an example of that. Sometimes some of our classrooms get that instruction. Then you get towards the top of the pyramid, and all our schools have headway counselors and therapists, and we also have social workers, and they are providing more specialized approach supports for kids on that social emotional side. So that pyramid model, really want to share that we have very concrete things that are in place academically in that model, and also the social emotional side as well. Who are we proud to be? So we end our assemblies with that. That's our school cheer, and so that's why I put that there. The kids scream it, and sometimes it's a little loud, but it's really fun. And so this was a hard slide for me, because it was hard for me to find enough photos there. Not enough photos, but I wanted to put too many, then you wouldn't be able to see any of them. But I'll just go over a few of these. This is in the upper left there. That was our, before school began, we had a pizza night. It was a welcome back to school, fun night. We had an ice cream truck, free bus rides, and pizza, of course. And that's when we had a packed house. It was wonderful. We had a lot of free bus rides as well, especially the kindergartners. They loved that. And it was a chance for we changed it up a little bit, and we wanted to make it fun. number one, and before maybe it got a little stuffy, a little too much curriculum maybe on day, before school even started. And so it was a great fun night, lots of smiles. We had a high school robotics team there doing robot stuff out on the sidewalk, and just a really fun way to kick off the school year. On the far right there, you see a student wearing a burn shirt, and you can see REACH there. That's our PBIS acronym. What they're doing right there, that's a school assembly, our first REACH assembly we had this year. And those are led by kids. And so we do a lot of things at school that we try to encourage student leadership. And they're there. I think they were doing the joke. We have a joke during each assembly, and that was something they're doing. A lot of great things on here, and I'll skip down to that middle slide where people are eating food there. This is an example of CPSS and my parent-teacher organization, the PTO, kind of coming together. We changed some of our events this year with the very intent to say, how do we make sure that our events are attended and celebrated, and when we show up to those events, do they look like our school? And the people that show up to those events look like our school and look like our kids. And so we changed it up, and we had a potluck, and we had like over 75 dishes, I believe it was. We had well over 22 different countries and regions represented, and it was just a blast. And to see so many smiles and staff, every single teacher was there. It was, at times, I think we counted about 300 people were there, so it was a huge chunk of our school population. It was just a really, really fun night. One more thing to celebrate that some of you might be attending next week is kind of the lower left there. You see two Somali parents, or actually it's one of our Somali liaison and a Somali parent. We have a Somali parent fire group. That's that parent education group, and so this was our second group. We did an Hispanic parent group last year, and then we're looking forward to doing another one this spring. But that's been just a blast. It's so fun to see parents go through that process, and they're so proud, and they ask them really tough questions, which I think is great, though, and to give them those skills. And this was intentionally, we got this in right before conferences, and I prepped my teachers that, hey, you're going to get asked some questions, and so be ready to answer that. So that's another great photo to represent the work that we're doing. I could go on and on, but thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lyle. That was very informative. You know, way back in 1972 was when I stepped into Bern for the first time, entering kindergarten in those old temporary buildings, back in the day. Miss Bliss, that was the teacher. Yes. Any board member comments or questions? Director Alt.
Just one comment. Thank you very much, Lyle, for coming and for presenting this report. It's always great to hear what's going on in our schools. And I wanted just to applaud you and your staff for taking the step to make a courageous change in the events with families, because we get into our traditions, and traditions are important, and at the same time revisiting them and saying, you know what, we're going to change things up and try something different. Obviously it was a success because it was really well attended, and thank you for doing that.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you. Any other board member comments or questions? Director Currier.
I appreciate the addressing the social emotional aspect to learning. That Bloom, way back, a million years ago, Bloom addressed both of them, but we pretty much focused on cognitive development. Education did for years and years and years, and we're finally looking at the social emotional and the importance of that in learning. And really, kids, if you don't look at both of them, kids will not learn. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Director Luth.
Not specifically to you, but as a result of you and some of your predecessors over this past fall, it's interesting, and it kind of came out to me more tonight, so I'll give you credit for that. But as we look at different sites, different schools come and present to us, what struck me tonight is the common thread that's being addressed across all of the schools, which is really gratifying to see. But it's also interesting to see the building leadership teams and how they are coming together and personalizing it to them, to their staff, to their families, and to the students at their school. It kind of came out. I could see some slight little differences. It kind of jumped out at me, and I think that's the beauty of it, because it's not like one size fits all for a district either. Each neighborhood has some uniquenesses, and the staffing there and the leadership there have their uniquenesses, and they're bringing that into play. It's interesting to see that combination of commonality as well as uniqueness for each individual group. And I think that's where the real strength is you bring those two together, the center is really, really strong. So thank you for that, as well as your colleagues. But that was just, as I was listening to you and looking at this, it just jumped out at me more than I had seen before. So I think it'll be interesting as future presentations come on for this group to be able to see that and appreciate that across the district as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luth. Dr. Van Den Boom.
Thank you again, Lyle, and I reiterate a lot of the comments from my fellow board members. There was something that struck me, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the focus students connected to the building goal. I'm interested, so does the student and their family understand that they're a focus student, or is that sort of, that's behind the scenes? So staff understands that you're focusing on these students, but they're not approached, or their parents aren't approached, so that's more of a internal staff that says, these are the students we really need to focus on in order to improve so can you just tell me a little bit more about that focus student process?
Sure. So the main purpose behind that is more behind the scenes internally. Yeah. And the number one reason for that is, one, we have historically underserved that population group. But two, it probably just as important, I guess, is that we need, and we had a long conversation as a building leadership team about this, is that we wanted to make sure that the goal was alive. And our way of making it alive is connecting it to a real student. And so that was more, but at the same time, it's not like when the teachers get together and talk about data, they only talk about these 5 kids or these 10 kids. They talk about all their students, and so all our students are still our focus students, but we wanted to make sure the goal was alive, and so we don't share that publicly with the parents or whatnot, because we do, let's say if a child's getting specialized instruction in some way, then the parents are informed. But for the building goal purpose and making them aware that their child's a focus student, no. Because all their kids are focus students, and that's the truth is that the teachers are focusing on all the kids. But at the same time, professionally, we wanted more than anything is to make sure that the goal could stay alive and by connecting to a real body, a real student.
No, and honestly, I appreciate it. Obviously, your whole presentation really talked about how you address all students. Mm-hmm. So it was clear to me that this wasn't we're segregating and we're focusing on specific kids. But what I liked about it, is when you looked at your building goals, and you say from 44 to 48% in reading, for example, one is, it sounds to me like that really helps make it more tangible and more for the staff and so forth to really kind of hone in on that goal and kind of make that happen, if you will, for the rest of the student body as well. Are those types of goals, in your mind, achievable? When you talk about SMART goals, the A in SMART is usually achievable.
Correct.
So when I see 44 to 48, I cringe a little bit on the one hand, because I'm saying, okay, that still means when we're done with the goal, we got 1 out of every 2 students that's still not where we want them to be. Right. But at the same time, a 4% change can be a sizable change. So do they feel like those building goals are realistic? And, that's why I say the focus thing, I think, helps make it happen. Right. But are those realistic, and does the staff feel they're realistic as well?
I think they do, and the reason for that is that we, in last spring, actually, we showed the staff, what does that look like? And so when we had them pick numbers for kids, yep. it's if you, let's say, it's roughly about 5 students per classroom, yep. A little less than that actually, but most teachers picked 5 students that would achieve that. And I do believe that they're going to reach it, and I think that their mindset is that they can do it because we showed them graphically in many different ways that we can do this. And at the same time, though, like what you're alluding to as well, is it is challenging. It's not as simple as just making sure that these 5 students move it, because it's also making sure that all the things that you've done before, so you're adding on top of that. And so that's what makes it a challenge. If we dropped everything else, for sure we could make sure that these 5 students in this classroom made it, but that's not what we do. This is in addition to, and so it's achievable, but it's still a lot of hard work.
Yep. Thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Any other, oh, yeah.
Just
Superintendent
to your point, I just wanted to clarify, so that we don't confuse any parents who might be watching. We do have focus programs in the district that are specialized programs that are part of our special education IEP process. Those are not, that's not the same thing that we're referring to here. We're just using the sort of the term focus. And so I just wanted to make sure I clarified that those are not the students that you're referring to that would be in our formal focus
IEP,
program.
yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that clarification. Any other board member comments or questions? Well, thank you for that presentation. It's wonderful.
You're welcome.
Keep up the good work.
Yep.
Thank your staff.
Yep.
We will now move into the report section of our meeting. First on the agenda will be a report on fall enrollment. Presenting will be Lisa Ryder, our Executive Director of Business Services.
Good evening. It is typically in November when we begin talking about enrollment and bring to the school board the fall enrollment information. Being passed around tonight for the board members and for those in the audience here are a couple of pages that are supplemental, and I'll touch on those when we get to those particular slides. This PowerPoint presentation is available on our website in the agenda. Tonight we're going to begin our conversation talking about our fall enrollment data, but we're going to end our conversation discussing our projection data for enrollment. And as we will pick up that conversation after tonight in later weeks when we begin to talk about our 2019-2020 budget, since the revenue is really built upon enrollment projections. As we begin tonight, early learning students, our early education students, I want to touch base on them. Most of the data we go through as we move forward will be K-12. But first, let's start talking a little bit about our early education students. We have three basic categories of students of how they might be served in our district when they are younger than kindergarten. So early childhood special education, those the services provided to students receiving that, the services are funded by state and federal funds, typically through special education, and it is recorded under the general fund. Then we have a group of students who may be receiving what we call voluntary pre-kindergarten programming. This began in 16-17 for our school district, and we have been expanding that each year, so we'll talk a little bit more about that, and is funded by a state grant through the general fund. Then our third area is school readiness, and this has been around for quite some time, as has the early childhood special education services. School readiness is funded by tuition and state pathways scholarships and is run through our community education programming. So any child under the age of kindergarten may be served by any one of these three services. As we take a look at those numbers over the last 3 years, we do have this categorized, this graph, by early childhood special ed, VPK, voluntary pre-kindergarten, and the school readiness. And you can see that the left column is the blue for 16-17, the red is the 17-18, and the green is the 18-19. Just for your information, when we began tracking this information in 2016-17, as we began our VPK program, we wanted to kind of see and compare how this happens through the next few years. And so the reality is we began with all three of them combined serving 572 students. As we now look at this for 17-18, the school we just finished, or school year we finished, that number was 721. And as we move into this year, the number is 727. And so you might wonder, well, what's, 6 different, right, from the previous year, but why not a larger increase? And the reality is, as we expanded our programming for voluntary pre-kindergarten, that meant that there were more opportunities for families that might otherwise have been assessing the services through our school readiness programming. So they kind of shifted more than we saw an ad. Does that make sense? So as we move on to talk about the rest of the information, now we're going to move away from the early childhood, and we're going to talk K-5 in this case, and basically K-12 for most of our demographic information as we get into that. Beginning here with our elementary school, we have a 2-year comparison for October 1 seat count. And I want to talk a little bit about what is October 1 seat count all about. The state requires that we submit our information for enrollment to them twice a year. The first is October, fall count, October 1. So any child who is enrolled as of October 1 in our school district, we need to report those students. And it's more kind of a head count, you might say, okay? As we get into the end of the year data that we submit, that's a little bit more granular and more detailed with regard to, well, exactly how many days did you serve that student at your particular district? And so we'll talk further about that in the future. But for right now, these are the students that as of October 1 were within our schools. And so you see this graph showing by school, a comparison of 2018 in the yellow or gold compared to the black, which is the 2019 year. And this is just our elementary schools being shown in this 2-year comparison for K-5. This is not including our VPK students or other pre-kindergarten students that might be served in that building. The next slide is our secondary students, a 2-year comparison again, October 1 seat count, 2018 versus 2019. 2018 being in the gold, and black is the 2019. This is for grades 6 through 12, and you can see the various different school buildings in which they're served. As we move into a graph that shows a 6-year trend, you can kind of see for K-12 combined, what has that graph looked like? And I will also make note at this point in time that on these graphs, you'll see at the bottom left, that there will say 2014 through 2018 finalized MDE fall counts. And you'll see a 2018-19 preliminary MDE fall counts. The reality is that a school district has through December 31st to submit their data for fall. And it's a matter of just making sure that the data is clean, because as other school districts submit their data, if they claim the same student, only one school can claim the student. So there has to be conversations then between districts who have information that might be inaccurate in their systems, and they need to clean that up. So they give to December 31st for that data to be what I call edited at the state level. So as you take a look at this, just note that that's kind of how these graphs look. So if you look at my preparation for the projections last year and you compared the numbers, maybe 17, 18 numbers changed. Very possibly because we had a few things to clean up possibly before December 31st when that was finalized. So as you take a look at this graph, it basically shows our enrollment has been declining for the last 6 years. As we move into the next graph, we're taking a look at K-12, and this is by grade now, so you can kind of see what is it this fall, this October, that our K-12 enrollment is looking like by grade. Our kindergarten grade level has been holding fairly steady to the past 2 years, and you'll find that there's shifts in some of the other grades that is actually the result and possible reason for some of the decline that we are experiencing. I also want to point out that this does include for our 12th graders, because that number looks a little high, right? So I want to point out that that number includes our 12th graders that might be continuing for a first semester because they're wrapping up a few things that they needed to finalize everything, or possibly our best students who are ages 18 to 21. We're going to now move into the part of the report in which we talk about the composition of our fall data. And so, again, we're really focusing on that K-12 group. And this fall data then is for various different views. We're going to take a look at what is our makeup. So special education enrollment trend, this is the past 6 years. The gold showing our special education served students, and the black showing our non-special education served students. So you'll see that there's a row of numbers right below the graph, which are the students that are served through special education. the percentage that you can see of the general population, the total population, I should say, and the years in which we're reviewing from 2014 through 2019. So when you see those numbers, keep in mind that's the 2018, 2019 year. So this is the, when does the school year end when you look at that, even though this is our fall data for 18. Make sense? And the next slide takes that information. We break it down now by school. And with that school population, we're showing you the percentage of special education students by school site with 3 lines going across the top. The gold that goes across all of them shows the district average of 14%. The elementary average for all of those that are shown in the black bars, that's an average of 15%. And our secondary average is at 14% and shown with the black bar across the top, but our secondary are going to be in the gray and the gold bars of data. This is based on our fall data for special education students by building. Next, we're going to move into our limited English proficiency enrollment trend. And so you see here similar type information as what we've seen on the special education. The gold showing our LEP students served, as well as then let me say that again, it's, yes, enrollment trend. So these are the students that are being served, and then the non-LEP is in the black. You can see the student counts, next the percentages, and the years below that. Our next slide is our eligible LEP students by building. So I'm sorry, I had said just a moment ago that these are the students served. It's very close. The students that we're serving compared to the students who are eligible is very close in our limited English proficiency. So we double-checked that before getting this information out to you, because sometimes is it served or is it eligible? In this case, it's all eligible, but the served are very close. So now we're breaking this down by school building. The black bars of data show our elementary schools. The gray are our BAS, BEST, and BHS, and our gold are our middle schools. And then you see the averages across with the lines going across the bars, and those lines are district average of 18% in the gold line. The gray line is the elementary average of 25%, and our secondary average of 12% is the black line across the graphs. Again, our preliminary data for this fall for counts. Now we're going to move into some slides that talk about ethnicity. Our first slide has a lot of information on it. It could take some time to really absorb all of this. What it is showing you in visual form bar graphs for our enrollment over the last 6 years, and a different color for each different ethnicity. And the table below it gives you the counts. And this is where one of those pages that was circled around is for the same information, but showing it to you in percents, in case that's useful for you. So as you take a look at this, we have the K-12 enrollment, and then you have lines of each of the different ethnicities and the counts there shown, as well as the visual colored graph, bar graph. The next slide takes us and breaks it down by our school sites. And so using our school sites for each bar, knowing that you have all of your population for that site, and assuming 100% of your students, showing you visually by the various different colors that represent the ethnicities, the percentages of the students in each of the different school sites. And this is the other page that was circled around that shows you this information, actually giving you the percent numbers by school site that the graph is visually showing you. We attempted to put the percents on this particular graph. It just got really busy and hard to read. So we thought this might be better. I will load up onto the website the additional 2 supplemental pages at the tail end of this presentation as well. Now we're going to move over to the free and reduced eligibility trend for the 6 years. Information shown very similar to our other areas. Here we show our free and reduced numbers that are in the gold, and you see the count itself as well as the percent of our total population and the year for which we're talking about. And this is free reduced count per percent per year. Again, based on our fall counts, there is a period of time in which families apply for free and reduced eligibility. And there's a point in time where every year they have to have a new application. And if we don't receive a new application from a family that previously was eligible, then they reach a point where they might be dropped from being eligible and have until they reapply. And so this data, we always hold off until we reach past that point, and so that we're trying to really make sure that our data is comparable to the previous years. So we feel that it is. This data changes on a daily basis. As we take a look at this now broken down by our building sites, the black bars being our elementary schools, gray being our BOS, BEST, and BHS, and our middle schools showing in the gold. And then the lines going across the top, the district average showing 48% in the gold line. The gray line is 53% for our elementary average for free reduced eligibility, and our black line for secondary average of 44% across the bars. We've completed all the information with regard to the makeup of our demographics of our students. We want to take a couple of slides here and talk a little bit about the school choice. And this is one of those areas that it's very hard because everything is a moving target and all the schools are serving students. And to edit that data takes like 2 snapshots in time. And that's what the state focuses on. So it's best to look back at this data. So the information you're looking at here is no longer fall data, but rather after the last year's over, done, complete, everyone's got their information in, and we're then taking a look at how does this look for us. We want to know the total students we're serving, which was 8,748 for the school year of 2017-2018. Of those students, 8,182 of them were residents, and 566 of those students were non-residents. Of the total residents that we have, you can see in the circle over on the right-hand side that of all of the students totally residing in our school district, there's 1,942 who are attending elsewhere. We have 84 who are tuitioned out elsewhere, and we have 337 who are attending a charter elsewhere, but they are all residents within our school district. And then the smaller circle over on the left, you see are the non-resident students that have chosen to attend ISD 191. This information then, we're going to take that red area of the pie graph, and we're going to break that down for you so that you can see where are they going if they're not being served here. And with that information, we do have the location of the school that they're attending as well as the count of students. And again, this is a look back of information for the 2017-2018 school year. I want to show on the next slide a definition of enrollment terms. So just to reiterate what it is that we have as a difference between our fall and our end of year. Fall count, again, is anyone who's served at the time of October 1st. It is a count, and it's based on the number of students who are enrolled at that time. When you look at the end of year enrollment, this is a calculation at the end of the year that then takes into consideration what portion of the year were you with us. If you weren't here the full year, exactly how many days were you? And if I'm here, but I'm also in another district previous, they're going to get a portion of the aid generated for that same student as relative as to what we will, but in total, the state's not paying more than 1.2 potential ADM or pupil units, okay? So in this calculation, that's when the year end is far more granular, far more detailed, and it does include then at that point in time also the students that we enroll through extended day or extended year programs. So that could be our summer school programming, our PALS programming, our BYC, all of that which we offer to our students gets included in that calculation. End of year is the numbers that I utilize when trying to calculate the end of year financial statements, as well as the budgeting process. We project those numbers and use those numbers. So that's where the difference is between fall enrollment. You'll find that our HR department and Stacy Sovine will use that more heavily. He actually tries to find a middle ground, because you can't necessarily staff entirely on your fall enrollment if it does happen to be higher than at the end, and so you want to find that middle ground. So that's what he does with that information. We're going to bring back up 2 slides here, the first of which is our grade level enrollment as of October 1. So this is the fall enrollment again, and this is for the current year of 8,400 students. The next slide is going to show you that same information, only now this is the projection for the end of year. And this is showing 8,412. So we actually show a net gain of 12 students projected. This is not necessarily meaning that 12 more students will walk in the door and we'll serve them. There's a whole lot more ability happening in the mix. There's a whole lot of other programming that we're doing and serving students outside of the school day and outside of the school year that get incorporated into the end of the year projections. With this information, we have 10 years of data that we keep in a model. And we have that information for fall, and we have that information for end of year. Some of that end of year information is final, and some of it is projected for the most recent data. With that information, then, we have the ability, with the projection model, to try various different methods of calculating and projecting forward what that enrollment might look like. And so in looking at the various different options we had before us, we felt that this was the ratio method. The 7-year weighted ratio method was one that came very close in the previous year, had we selected it, to being what we actually ended up with. And it allows for a 7-year look versus just kind of focusing on the last 2 years, which might have a more significant decline or increase depending upon what your information shows. But the reality is, taking a 7-year weighted ratio method, we believe reflects what we would anticipate moving forward. So that's what the method that is used in utilizing our past information, projecting that then forward, and these are the figures we would then use when running future projections for what I call what-if scenarios in budgeting purposes. And this concludes the report related to enrollment for this fall.
Well, thank you, Lisa. As always, a wealth of information, and you did a nice job of pointing out, people wonder why this is important for us to understand so early in the school year. We're getting into our budget workshop in a couple weeks here, and this lays the basis for that. It lays the basis for hiring and planning for the years, and so it's very, very important information for us to understand. Any questions or comments for Lisa? This isn't an action item, so it's more discussion here. Director Vandenboom.
I do have a question. It's regarding the students that are leaving and the students that are coming. Do we have any information around ethnicity? In other words, for the incoming group, you show 560 students are attending our schools from outside, but it doesn't really give any sort of sense for who's coming in. And then on the outside, leaving, I could see what districts are going to, and it's really good information. The question is, do we know the ethnicities of the people that are leaving versus coming?
We do for the students we're serving.
Correct?
The students that we are not serving, we may never have seen in our district.
Okay,
And so
hard to get.
we don't have that information then, right? So we do have it for those that we're serving, but for the students who reside within our school district but may not be served by us, it would not be complete.
Okay. And I was looking at a couple of different things. One is, the number of special ed students. A few years ago it was 11%, and we were pretty steady at 11%. We're moving up to 14%, I think, on average, 14 in that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of I'll call it unfunded special ed dollars. So the higher that percentage goes, there's missing funding, if you will, for a larger percentage of our population.
Yeah, so as you take a look at particularly slide 9, be wary of the fact that when we're talking percentages are also based on a base. And so in our case with a declining enrollment, your numbers may not necessarily change much. So like from 2018, fiscal year 2018 to 2019, we're at 1197 versus 1212, which is a total of 15 students.
Yeah.
Okay, so just be cautious of the fact that percentages can sometimes look a little bit different than the numbers if you have a declining enrollment situation as we do, and your special education population doesn't decline as quickly as the total population does, your numbers are gonna be skewed a little bit, right? Aside from that, you're absolutely correct in the fact that our special ed percentages of students served who require those services, it does require typically additional supports, and with that, then there is an area of costs that are not funded by state or federal, and it's what we call the cross-subsidy,
Yep.
and it is growing.
Yep.
It is true.
And I noticed that, we'll talk about this a little later, but I noticed in the audit that our federal funding is going down for, a lot of unfunded mandates, so the dollars that we get from the federal government to cover some of these costs, it appears to be going down. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's an interesting sort of trend, if you will, that's going to cost us and be a challenge for our district.
Agreed.
Thank you. Before I jump to other board members, I'd be remiss if we did, and I know you know this, we had a workshop on the departing students. For the first time, we have a lot of good information. I see Aaron standing back there. He presented us for, it was actually a couple hours. And so we do have action plans in place, to hopefully start addressing some of that. One other note, and I know you didn't call this out, Lisa, but there was a new charter school that opened in our district this year. And so we suspect that accounts for about 60, of an immediate drop. And I'm not sure if this is known yet either, but another church in our district announced that they will be starting a high school program with 9th grade next year, and then 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th. And so, there's just ongoing things that are drawing students, outside of our district. With that, I'll look to other board members if they have comments or questions for Lisa. Director Miller.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for bringing this information tonight. I have a handful of questions. You can go back to the couple slides in the individual elementary schools, that one there, yes. I have a pretty good understanding of some of the challenges with, say, Harriet Bishop and Byrne and our more peripheral schools. I'm a little confused by the projected drop at Sky Oaks. Do we have any information? I kick this either to Cindy or Lisa.
The charter school that Jim just was referring to, we took our biggest hits at Hidden Valley and at Sky Oaks with students that went to that school.
And then if we go a couple up, I think, one back maybe. So I'm a little, so we're actually showing Eagle Ridge with an increase in 19, but that's driven principally by Hidden Valley, Harriet Bishop, which we have pretty sizable declines. Or is that just because we know the student body, the class coming in is going to be larger? Or?
The 6th grade class is one of our largest classes, and so the 9th grade class, the 8th grade group that went to the 9th grade was significantly less than that 6th grade group.
So that actually might be an artificial bump, to be
Right.
clear. Okay. Slide 13, if you would. So this is more of a statement than a question. We often speak about how diverse our district is. What I find interesting here is the demographics that would be classified as diverse stay relatively the same throughout these. It's really a decline of the white demographic that is driving the overall decline. So again, that's more of a statement than a question. On the free and reduced, where we had, I just want to question about, do we anticipate, well, okay, now we don't have that in 19, there's a district-wide change in the way we're identifying or targeting, accepting free and reduced?
So what we're asking for is, we are asking for a process across the district that has all families first completing a survey that provides us permission to share their information internally only. Because without that permission to share internally, it requires that a family that is eligible for free or reduced status must show a letter in order to receive some other educational benefits that may be afforded their students should they be eligible for free or reduced. And so we're just trying to find a method moving forward where all families would complete this survey, and the survey basically, will you provide us permission to share your information internally only? If not, then that's fine, but then we just need to know that. And then with that process, there's a link then right to the application as well. So it does ask for families to either then waive the application or complete the application. It's an attempt to really just have all families going through the process, and kind of, it's a step for everybody to take, and it takes away then the focus on any particular group.
Yeah, Lisa, when we call that's kind of proactive
Yes.
in our approach. We want to make sure that some families might not be aware that they would actually qualify. This is very valuable service for some of our families in need, and so sometimes, for whatever reason, they're not aware. And so I do think, this is kind of a proactive approach, opt-in, opt-out kind of thing, and
And I was just
so
curious
we'll
if that's
probably
going
see
to
that
drive
number
a
grow
change.
because of it,
Yes,
yeah.
that's-
You're absolutely right.
That's all
We'll
I was asking about, really, is if
Yeah.
that's going to drive a change in the data, maybe.
And we're hoping that it also means that more families, because of this process, will complete the application when they may not have in the past done so. We do see that somewhat of a trend as students get older and they reach that secondary level, that maybe families don't take the time to complete that application when they might be able to find some assistance with regard to the various different fees and other things that could be waived if they were eligible.
All right, and then I have one last sort of item, and this is more of a, throwing it out there for point of discussion. We are a district that's challenged by declining enrollment, is very blatantly obvious in this report. We're also a district that's challenged by 10 elementaries, 3 middle schools, and we have a lot of small neighborhood schools. I'm just curious if have a feel yet for where we're going to reach a tipping point where that becomes a real challenge. Because right now, the only way to deal with the real world challenge that comes out of these numbers is staffing changes, class size changes, et cetera. But at some point, that's going to become unmanageable. And that's an open question, and maybe it doesn't even have an answer here tonight, but I think it's something that we need on the radar screen. So.
We've already started some conversations about that, some background work. That's something that I think definitely in the next year, 18 months, that the district and the board is going to have to take a look at moving forward. We're getting at the point where it's difficult to manage class size at the elementary because some of our elementaries are small enough. As you know, when we have 2 sections, you can't condense that into one, and oftentimes to add a third becomes very, very low. So I think we're right at that tipping point, and that's a good way, I think, to ask that question. And that's something that we've already started doing some background work on to bring to the board in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller. Any other? Director Alt?
Thank you, Chair Schmid. Dovetailing on Director Miller's question about free and reduced lunch, and I understand you may not have the answer tonight, but are we aware of any, based on the change in how we're proactively requesting families to fill out the applications, have we increased our capture rate of completion?
We ran some numbers for the principals so that they would have this prior to conferences. And when we ran the numbers, I think they were a little surprised to learn that only about 20% district-wide of our families had gone through that process of the survey. Now, to be clear, the survey was not necessarily out there before the links to the application were. So a lot of our families may have completed the application as necessary, but they didn't necessarily hit the survey, right? And so we were a little late in getting that survey out there as we're trying to develop something that made sense. We're working on a more long-term program. We're running into a few glitches on how to make that all happen, but the goal is to find a way for us to really make this automated and not be a drain, but actually be a means and a method for our families to kind of give us their information once, and then it would kind of pre-populate other forms that they otherwise typically have to fill out, and with that process, be able to just be something that becomes very routine and very, very much just a practice on an annual basis. Takes all of the, wondering around it out of it, and it's just part of the flow.
Great, thank you. And then one thing that I did want to point out, because it was a question I had for you prior to the meeting, and that if you look at slide 10,
Yes.
it looks like there are 2 elementary schools that are relatively low as far as their special ed population.
Right.
And that's because there is no focus program there.
That is correct. Thank you for pointing that out. Let me just grab my notes here quick. That is Gideon Pond and Harriet Bishop do not have 191 focus programs. Gideon Pond does have a 917 program for deaf, hard of hearing. However, only the students who are residents are included in our information. And so it would not necessarily include all of the students that are served through that program. So that is why you see those numbers looking lower. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other board member questions, comments?
One other
Sure.
question, and it's, sorry, I got to turn that on. On your early childhood funding, I didn't see parents' checkbooks anywhere in there. Is it just missing? Because I assume some voluntary pre-K is funded. So you only show sort of funding sources that are is there an additional funding source for any of these programs that's called, a parent wants my child in this and they write a check?
So voluntary pre-kindergarten, no.
Okay.
Okay. But our other preschool programming that we do offer that doesn't necessarily fall, so like the school readiness, for example, there's kind of a weighted scale. It's like our ECFE programming as well.
Yeah.
So there's a weighted scale. So depending upon your, the financial status of the family, then there's a sliding scale as to what that rate would be.
So there are some other
There are
funding
some.
sources that are just not listed here?
Yes,
Okay.
I would say that there are. The ECSE does not necessarily charge families, and voluntary pre-kindergarten does not. So it's really just your school readiness programming and other community ed programs that we
Okay.
offer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Schatz?
I do have a question actually about the early education counts, ECSE. Yeah, so it is possible for some of these students to move from year to year between these programs, right?
Right,
Not all the same students in different programs from year to year.
that's very true, because our early childhood special education students can be from birth all the way through pre-K, so there's a longer period of time in which they might move. The voluntary pre-kindergarten is just our 4-year-olds, and our school readiness can be 3 or 4-year-olds. So there is an opportunity for a student to shift kind of depending upon which year, each year being served possibly differently.
Okay, thank you. I
Yep,
just wanted to
thank you.
clarify that they were not the same counts of students in different
Right.
static years. Thank you.
All right, any other board member questions, comments? Well, Lisa, thanks for that information. It is interesting, the difference of 12 students that should hopefully make the budgeting a little more straightforward, right? It's not 100 or 1,000, so, we want it to go up, but at least, for this year, it's within a certain constraint. But thank you for all that detailed information.
You're welcome.
All right, next we will move to our Board of Education Committee reports. It's usually about this time where the system logs me out, but it looks like we're there. All right, we will move to our Technology Committee, which is chaired by Director Vandenboom.
Yeah, and I don't have a long report here, but we did meet just today. I met with Doug and Rachel to go through sort of a list of topics for, I'll say, the next 12 months, if you will. So we're compiling that list and so forth. But our next meeting is actually on Tuesday next week, so I don't have a lot to report right now.
It's an excellent report, thank you. All right, Policy Committee chaired by Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Schmid. The Policy Committee has been awaiting work that staff has been doing on policies. So we actually have not met since our last board meeting. We do meet Tuesday, November 27th at 4:30 here in Diamond Head.
All right, thanks. Well, I was just noticing the large number that we have in our consent, so obviously
been working
previous work
hard.
has made its way forward, so that's good. Our Student Performance and Achievement Committee, which is chaired by Director Luth.
Thank you, Chair. We met, there's a big announcement right there compared to the other two. We met yesterday, literally. Met last night. The focus of our meeting was the world's best workforce. It is a more detailed presentation to the committee that will be presented as a report, I believe, at the next meeting as prescribed by the state. But the focus areas are around the following items. All students ready for kindergarten. All students in third grade achieving grade level literacy. Close achievement gaps among all groups. Career and college ready by graduation. And all students graduate. Those are the key focus areas. I went into a fair amount of detail within each of those. So there was a lively discussion, et cetera. I missed some of the meetings, so I'm not as best to be able to tell some of those details, but nonetheless, that was the focus of the meeting and will likely be the focus of what is brought to us, just at a little bit more board level, I guess, versus committee level. So that'll be brought, I believe, to the December meeting, and then our next meeting of the Student Performance and Academic Committee will be Wednesday, December 19th. So that'll actually be after the next meeting, so I will be in the boat of my peers and having not had a meeting between meetings. So, and that concludes unless my colleagues here have anything further to add. All righty.
Thank you, Director Luth. Our board representative for school district, intermediate school district 917 is Director Courier.
Thank you, Chair Schmid. The regular November meeting of 9/17 was held on November 6th, Election Day. The start time was moved up to 4:30 so as not to run into any difficulty with state law that requires no government meetings between 6 and 8 p.m. on election days. The meeting consisted of routine business items, a debriefing on a critical incident response, approval of an agreement between ISD 199 and 917 for purchase of an early childhood special education teacher for an early childhood mental health program, approval of compensation and terms and conditions of employment for classified school year employees, and a review and final reading of both the acceptable use and internet safety and student discipline policies. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Our last regular report will be our Sourcewell, formerly known as TIES. Our board representative is Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Schmid. I have nothing to report at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then we, of course, have miscellaneous assignments. Would anyone like to report on any of their miscellaneous assignments? Director Courier.
The November Association of Metropolitan School District meeting was held on November 2nd. The presenter was Kevin Rupp, an attorney in the firm Rupp, Anderson, Squires, and Walsberger, PA. He covered two very critical and timely topics to school districts: the Janus fair share fees and unrequested leaves of absences. It was very interesting. All AMSD meeting materials are on the website, www.amsd.org. I'll send the link to Jamie so she can send it out to board members. The public can access it as well through amsd.org. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any other Director Schatz?
I have a save the date for the next Foundation 191 fundraiser. That will be February 14th of 2019. No need to make dinner reservations. We're going to do it for you and entertain you. So come out, put February 14th, 2019 on your calendar. Come out and raise some money for the grant, the grants that Foundation 191 provides to our area students and groups.
Thank you. Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Schmid. I'll be reporting on the Burnsville Chamber assignment. In preparation for the next legislative session, the Burnsville Chamber is already planning events for its members to connect with our legislators, both here and in St. Paul. The Chamber is also in the process of organizing the annual State of the City event address. For anyone who has not yet attended this presentation, it is highly informative as Mayor Couts reviews events and developments within the city of Burnsville during the past year. Attendees also get a peek into plans for the future. If you are able to attend, I recommend doing so. Stay tuned for details.
Thank you. Director
Just a
Vanderbilt.
quick note, so I will be attending the pre-delegate assembly for the MSBA on Saturday. So if you have any comments or things around legislation that you have interest in making sure that we as a district push forward, let me know. There will be a follow-up meeting, the actual delegate assembly where we vote on all of the laws that they're actually trying to get pushed forward into the legislature is going to take place in December, early December. So just wanted to make you guys aware of that as well. And I did have a question for the SPA committee,
Oh, sure.
if I
Go
could
right
ask
ahead,
it. It has to do with the North Star accounting system, the accountability system that's been put forward. So in the world's best workforce, are you seeing the North Star accountability metrics being pushed into the world's best workforce legislation?
Yes.
Okay, short answer is it will be integrated. It won't be two different things. It'll be the same thing.
I wouldn't go that far,
Okay.
but data is being used. I don't know that I would be able to answer it, whether it be
Okay.
fully integrated or not, but there's
it's
definite
likely to
synergy.
see
There's
the
definite
two-
synergies going on.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
Would
you.
you agree?
Well, sort of. MCAs are still a critical part. As Dan read, they have these five bullet points, I think, and graduation rates being one of them, which is, that's a whole nother conversation. But I think what Dan means is I brought this question up, is as North Star results are brought forward to the district and the help is offered to the district, how are we utilizing that to work back into the building plans and such, and that is happening. So we discussed that a bit in the meeting, but I wouldn't call the evaluation metrics linear, exactly the same, because there are things going. For instance, North Star includes attendance as part of it, and there's no part of World's Best Workforce has anything to do with that. So.
Well, and I know that statute requires that every year we put forward the World's Best Workforce report, okay? So is this a second report that now needs to go to MDA every year, which is the North Star report on top of that, or are we expecting sort of the one report? And I know there are a few things in there that are probably not mandated by the World's Best Workforce that might not be included, but I am curious if it's going to be more onerous on our district or the same. If
Superintendent Amoroso can address that.
Thank you.
So the North Star ratings
Yes.
are a rating based on MCA scores, attendance, graduation, as Eric referred to. Our World's Best Workforce has goals in it using that same MCA data, so it's aligned in that sense. The World's Best Workforce, however, is so comprehensive in including our integration planning, our Title I planning. It has so many different components that, for example, attendance is a good example where that's used to determine the North Star ratings, but it's not called out specifically in the World's Best Workforce. However, the building plans, as you mentioned, we do have buildings that are looking at attendance as part of what they need to address. So I think that we will see, as we get more familiar, I think we're going to see alignment, like you said, not linear, but certainly the pieces are fitting together. We don't have to do a North Star report. The North Star is just the ratings, And the World's Best Workforce Report is going to be using that same data and then talking about what our efforts are, which ultimately should increase our North Star ratings.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other committee reports or assignments? All right. I know, Sundus, you've been waiting very patiently for the student updates, so please have it.
I have a small report for the mid-November progress report. So the first quarter ended on November 6th, and on the 7th and 8th, we had conferences all over the districts where students and parents met with teachers and discussed how their students were doing. Tryouts for many different winter sports have been underway, and other sports have already started. On November 8th, High School Musical had its opening performance and was a big hit, and everyone did amazing. At Burnsville High School this exact week, there's a food drive going on that's being held by Burnsville Strong, where all donations will be sent to our 360 community team to help those in need. And lastly, on Thursday, December 6th, there will be a family code night where there will be over 20 interactive activities for students and parents from the district to help learn coding or computer programming, and this event is open to everyone in the district. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Any questions for Sundus? All right, we will move to our superintendent report.
Thank you. I have a few items for the board today. The first one is about our Realtor Forum, which we held last week. I'm very pleased to tell you about this event. On November 7th, we had 120 realtors from in District 191 and around the region who came to Burnsville High School to learn more about our district. We called it Take a New Look at 191 and shared information about all of the ways we've changed with Vision 191. Topics included early childhood programs, our new elementary literacy curriculum, our STEAM to the third middle school model, pathways at the high school, and technology integration. I also spent some time talking about common myths about our district and how those compared to our reality. To finish the event, we had a student panel, including our board representative, Sundus, who did an awesome job, who shared their experiences at Burnsville High School and then offered short tours of the school. Plus, a continental breakfast and box lunches were provided by our own culinary students and teacher Matt Deutsch, and those were a big hit. It really was an amazing event, and we have heard nothing but positive feedback from realtors. I'm confident that this will be the start of a stronger and more productive relationship with realtors going forward, which will help us to tell our story to prospective families. We are also working already on some follow-up events for them, both small, going out to their offices, and then another large one in the spring. I'd like to thank everyone who helped make that happen, including Ruth Dunn and Erin Tinklenberg in our communications department for organizing the entire event. Second, I want to provide an update on recent meetings I've had with staff members. Through November and into December, I'm traveling to all of our schools and programs to hold conversations with the superintendent. These are informal conversations with employees to hear their thoughts about what we have to celebrate, what challenges we have, and what ideas they might have for improving the district. So far, we've held 7 meetings, and I've been really impressed and happy with how many staff members have participated. I've heard some great feedback, and what I'm starting to look for are trends both at the building level and at the district level, where we can identify what's working well and share that, celebrate that, and also where we might need to make changes and look at the ideas they're submitting for solutions and further improvement. I'd like to thank you to everyone who has participated so far, and I look forward to meeting with many more staff members over the next few weeks. Next, I have a brief update on the superintendent search. The window for accepting proposals from search firms closed this week. The next steps will be for the board to review those proposals and choose a firm. That will happen before winter break, and the search process will start in earnest in January. Members of our community will also be able to follow the process and keep up with any news or developments on our website at isd191.org superintendent search, or an easy way to remember it is just go to our homepage, and then at the bottom under quick links, there is a link right there for superintendent search. Last, I want to share with you work that students in Jeff Schwen's 5th grade class did to start the year at Hidden Valley Elementary. To help his students focus and cut through some of the kind of clutter that comes with the beginning of the school year, Jeff had students choose one word to be a focal point for them all year long. I'll let Jeff explain it more in this video.
My name is Aliana. My name is Samaya. that always return.
Well, this summer I was doing a lot of reading, John Gordon and his books, and his books really focus on positivity and really boiling down a lot of positive attributes for one word. And I've seen a lot of coaches doing the same thing, so I decided to try it for the first time this year with my 5th graders, because at the beginning of the year they get inundated with a lot of information, rules and regulations and procedures, and I really wanted them to focus on one word that would guide their journey throughout the year.
My name is Ikon, and I chose effort because it means to work hard. I want to be trusted so I can help and open up for them. My name is Readiness.
My name is Anissa, and I picked this word because I try my best every day.
The power is in the why. Why did they choose it? And throughout the days and the weeks and this year, I remind kids, why did you choose your word? In positive and maybe times where they're a little more challenged, just to remind them of what their word is and guide their journey and give them passion on their mission throughout the year.
I'm Samantha. I chose create because I'm creative and I love art. My name is Anisha. I picked the word reading because you remind people and you guide them. My name is Kylie, and I chose the word confident because I should be more confident before a test.
It's something we look on and reflect on, and every time we line up, we see it. And it's really been our focus is positive thoughts bring positive results.
So for those of you on Twitter, you might want to follow John Gordon. I have followed him myself for a couple of years, and this concept resonated with me, I think, when I heard about Jeff doing this, because last year I shared with staff at the beginning of the year that my one word was passion, and that stays true with me yet this year. I think it's so easy to feel overwhelmed by all the things that we're asked to do that having a single word as a reference point can help all of us, including 5th grade students, to stay focused on what kind of person we want to be and what we want to stand for. So thank you, Jeff, for sharing that lesson with his students, and thank you to all their students for sharing their one word with us. And that concludes my report for tonight.
Thanks for that report. It's really encouraging to hear about the Realtors Forum. I know as a board, we've been talking about that for quite some time. I mean, quite some time. So it's glad to see it come together and start debunking some of the myths and actually showing, you know, a lot of the good things happening here. So that's excellent to hear the attendance was so high. All right, we will move to board member reports now. Any board members with a report tonight? Well, that will be a first.
I'll do a quick one. One down, one to go.
Congratulations.
Anybody knows me knows what that means.
All right. Well, we will move right away into the business part of our meeting. First on the agenda will be the consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event any board member wishes to discuss an item, we will remove that item for further discussion and consideration. Any items to be removed tonight?
I do have a question just around the last item 8, which is the Minnesota High School League. This is the first time I've seen that, and I just wanted to ask a quick question about that.
So let's pull it then.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
We will remove item 8. Any other items to be removed tonight? All right. See none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second by Director Miller. Any discussion or comments? See none, all those in favor of the consent agenda motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And that is approved. We will now discuss, we've pulled item number 8, adopting a resolution supporting Form A application, Minnesota High School League Foundation.
Yep. My question, because I didn't realize this, are they reimbursing us for, oh, hi. Good. See, you thought you didn't think you'd get any questions about this. Hi, Guillaume, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
This is just the first time I've seen this. Are we getting reimbursed when, so for students that can't afford to participate in programs, are we then getting reimbursed by the Minnesota State High School League for some of that?
So it's the Minnesota State High School League Foundation. It's been in existence for years.
Yeah.
But it was sunset several years ago. It just couldn't get tacked down to the right legislation. And so it was reinstituted in 17, 18, but where the funding comes from, it's portions or all of sales from the state high school league tournaments. And then so the report that I need to generate and provide to them are the numbers from October 2017, broken down by grade level, and then the unduplicated number of students who participated in athletics and free and reduced, who qualified for free and reduced lunch. And then they put it into a formula and then cut a check back to the high school.
So that's fabulous, and that's new. I don't remember seeing that so it was on the consent agenda, and I just wanted to, so they are reimbursing for a percentage or some.
Yep, but
it's basically they're using their foundation money to reimburse districts that are having to pay out of their general funds.
Yep, it helps sort of try to offset some of the costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything helps, and I just thank you very much for bringing that forward, and I just wanted to make sure we talked about it. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
It's great stuff.
All right, so I will read the recommendation that the Board of Education adopts a resolution supporting Form A application to Minnesota High School League Foundation. Do I have a motion? So moved by Director
Seconded.
Schatz, second by Director Vanderboom. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
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 And the motion carries. We will now move into the new business part of our meeting. First on the agenda is to approve an extended field trip request application for initial approval of a field trip for Burnsville High School band students to go to Greece in the spring of 2020. Presenting tonight will be Keith French, and it looks like Molly isn't with you?
Molly's not here. She's
Okay.
doing the musical.
That's
The musical
wonderful,
tonight.
that makes sense. So we will let you do it.
Flying solo. So I'm here to just get the pre-approval for the forum for our trip for 2020, which is our biannual international trip for band students. Generally, we take students that are in 11th and 12th grade. We do take 10th grade students that are part of the wind ensemble who have auditioned into the top group. So.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll do the motion, then if they have questions, we'll let them ask. So the recommendation is to approve an extended field trip request application for initial approval of field trip for Burnsville High School band students to go to Greece.
So moved.
2020. So
Second.
moved by Director Vanderboom, second by Director Luth. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none?
Just comments. I wish I was in band again. You guys have some awesome trips.
We wish you were into band
No,
too.
no, it is really fabulous. It is a great experience. I know from way back when my students were doing it, and I know you guys, it's a lot of work and effort to help them get the funding for those trips and so forth, but I just think it's a fabulous program, and thanks for bringing it forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next on the agenda will be the resolution canvassing returns of votes of school district general election and authorizing issuance of certificates of election and directing the school district clerk to perform other election duties. Up at the podium will be Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services.
Thank you. November 6th was a general election, and ISD 191 School Board had 4 open positions and 5 candidates. The school board must adopt a resolution canvassing the election between the 3rd day or the 10th day after the date of the election. So therefore, we have this recommendation to approve adopting a resolution canvassing returns of votes of school district general election and authorizing issuance of certificates of election and directing the school district clerk to perform other election-related duties.
Thank you. Do you have a motion as read by Lisa? So moved by Director Miller,
Seconded.
second by Director Currier. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Next, we will move to approving on a first reading basis changes to Policy 202, School Board Officers, and then Policy 212, School Board Member Development. Presenter will be Superintendent Amoroso.
Thank you. The recommendation here is to approve on a first reading basis Changes to policies 202, school board officers, and 212, school board member development. These are minor changes, but were suggested by MSBA and then reviewed by administration and by the Policy Review Committee on October 25th.
All right, so the motion on the table, I'll just reread it, is to approve on a first reading basis changes to policies 202, school board officers, and 212, school board member development. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Director Courier, second by Director Miller. Any questions or comments? Actually, in 202, I'm sure this came from MSBA to require phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 training for a chair, which is fine.
I'll just add that a lot of that also came as a result of our development with MSBA this fall, and just recognizing the value of that training and wanting to ensure that that we had a board that had a high standard for that development.
I'm not discounting that as being added. I just found it amusing that they would add it and it's padding their pockets a little bit, but that's okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. All right, before we adjourn, we're going to be adjourning to a workshop to have our audit review, which is another important step in our budget process. So I just want to announce that for the audience. I will take a motion for adjournment. So moved by Director Schatz, second by Director Alt. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. It's 8 o'clock. Let's meet back here at 10 after.